Well, everybody, welcome back for the second session of this day-long AML conference. We're going to start this part of the day with a panel discussion to try and identify how it is, in practical terms, that you can derive value from technology solutions when seeking to comply and outperform. And I have to say that in my experience, there is a big gap, and maybe in your experience too, between talking to a technology vendor and hearing about all the marvelous things they can do on the one hand, and actually having that technology embedded and working and delivering value. Sometimes that gap can be quite a long period of time. We've got a really great faculty to discuss this today on stage, and I hope that we're going to get some really interesting insights from them. I'm going to invite them to come up in just a moment, but joining me will be Tamara Vanmeggelen, who is MLRO and Head of Compliance at Mourant. Nadia Lewis, who is Head of Regulatory Consulting at Appleby. And Peter Messervy Gross, who is CIO at Altum Group. So if I could invite the panelists to come and join me on the stage, please. Thank you very much, guys. And this is a distinguished faculty, so I hope that we're going to get a lot of light and not too much heat from the questions that we would like to discuss. So the first item that I wanted to cover off was why or if RegTech is becoming essential. As a technology vendor, we naturally think that it's essential, but some of you may have different views. If it is essential, what are the top tips that you would recommend for firms to successfully implement RegTech solutions? And what are the biggest challenges to that implementation? Now, I'm going to turn first here to Tamara, because Tamara has first-hand experience of implementing a variety of solutions, including our own. So Tamara, what are your thoughts on why is RegTech essential, if it is, and how do you implement it well?
Thanks, Tom. First of all, I'm not an MLRO. I'm an MLCO for some of our Jersey entities. I just want to be transparent on that. RegTech is essential. Certainly our regulators, as we know here in Jersey and in all other jurisdictions, it seems, are wanting more and more data, and that's part of them meeting the FATF, the money val requirements. So you do need the technology to be able to extract that data out of your systems in a reportable way. And certainly from just deriving value for the business, you need to do that as well. What's successful, top tips for being successful is don't digitize your current process. Too many people sit in a room with those stakeholders, the key owners of those processes, and they want to just make the tool do what we do today and get frustrated when it doesn't. So that's not the point of it. So you have to encourage everybody to step back and see what is it that we're trying to achieve and think more broadly about that. I think that's a really, really important piece. And secondly is ensuring that you get buy-in from the top. You do need management. It's not an R&C thing. It really is about improving the client experience, improving the metrics that you're giving the business. And therefore, it's really important that management sees that and you're able to articulate that in the way so that when changes happen, people will be supporting that throughout the business and not giving friction to risk and compliance about, why doesn't it look like an Excel spreadsheet? Because that's what I used to see, and it's, no, we're done with that. This is a new workflow, this is how it goes.
Is there also an aspect of bringing not just management, but the people who will be using the solution with you? Because certainly in my experience, even if from a provider standpoint, it feels like we're improving people's working day and making it easier and making some tasks simpler to perform, sometimes there can be a bit of a fear of the unknown. We probably know this from our own lives. The natural default position is to do nothing or to resist change. Have you experienced that? And if you have, how have you overcome it?
Yeah, absolutely. You really have to force people, frankly, to just look at it and understand the benefits and use it again and again. And they have to see it for themselves, but it's like bringing the horse to water. You just absolutely have to do it. And which is why you need to stay close as senior people to the process. Don't just bring it off to a team and think that they're going to magically implement it. You as senior compliance and risk people need to stay close to ensure that it's running smoothly. And the other thing that happens is people run into, inevitably, as you say, the tool didn't do what they thought it would do. Maybe they made an assumption. Maybe it was something in a demo they saw, but it's now not working, some piece of it. And I do find people are immediately, it's a fail. I can't believe it, it's a fail. It doesn't do, this one thing we need to do. So again, change is hard, and you have to stay close to work through those challenges with everybody.
Thank you, Tamara. Pete, as someone who's also recently been through the process of spearheading the implementation of quite a big business change using our technology, interested in your reflections on whether it's important / essential, and if it is, how you got buy-in and how the implementation has gone.
Yeah, I'd say it is essential, absolutely. We've got increased regulation, increased client expectations, and also, to an extent, increased staff expectations about how they operate in their day-to-day business. So absolutely, I do think it's essential. As far as interactions around implementation, I think it's really important to find a vendor in whatever product you go for. Other products are available, I'm sure. That they understand the regulation, they understand your operations, and they understand the commerciality of what you're trying to do. And if they're really there peddling sharp-end tech but don't know how you're going to apply it, you're really going to struggle. Which is, we're very pleased to say that worked out well in our favour in this case.
Nadia, in some ways, you have a privileged view of this because you get to see many different organisations through your work and how they handle onboarding, remediation, screening processes, and in some cases, how they'd like to improve them. Interested in your reflections on, first of all, is RegTech important, essential, or essential? And if it is, how you get buy-in to actually make a transformative change?
Sure. There is no doubt that it is essential. It is going to be a key component of success, both for the island and for businesses generally going forward. There aren't enough compliance people, there aren't enough onboarding people to continue to do this in a paper-based environment. So this is not optional. This is coming. And I would say that I completely agree in terms of the journey, bringing people along. I think that the Academy will, and I wasn't aware of that until this morning, the Academy will be a massive help towards implementing this sort of thing. I think learning and training and bringing people on that journey so that they start to understand what it does and why it does it and what their role is within that chain is really important. And I think that it's not just a case of, plug and play, shove it out there, get everybody, to sort of try and buy into it on day one, but actually making sure that there's support just post that implementation stage so that actually, for those that perhaps didn't quite get it the first time, actually have a chance to keep up with their colleagues rather than become the dissuaders and the resistors.
It's really interesting. We did an event in Switzerland a couple of weeks ago, and Switzerland as a location is perhaps some way behind centres such as Jersey in its adoption of RegTech for historical reasons and considerations around hosting of data and what's possible or permissible or thought to be permissible under the regs there. But there is an appetite to start to change that. And in chatting with trust companies and banks in Switzerland, we were asked what we saw as the biggest barriers to adopting RegTech as being. And my answer to that question was that not the biggest barrier, but the biggest consideration is people. Technology is fine, it does what it does from us or from other vendors. It will do most of what you need. It won't do it exactly how you want to do it, but it'll probably be okay. That's not the difficult bit. The difficult bit is bringing your staff with you, your customers with you, and also your regulator or supervisor with you. And I think we're lucky in Jersey that certainly the Commission here, I think, has has been on a bit of a journey, but it's been a good journey, and now it's not controversial. I hope it's not controversial or brave as a service provider to say, we're going to do digital onboarding. I think that's kind of almost encouraged and expected. But that isn't the case in many other jurisdictions where regulatory understanding and appetite is still a little way behind where it might be here. And I completely agree with you, Nadia, that kind of educating people, bringing them with you and showing them that this doesn't mean a threat to how they do their work, but actually frees them up to do more important, more impactful work, qualitative analysis, rather than the kind of busy work of keying stuff, can be the key to success. And I think in our case, in the very few instances where we've not succeeded in implementing an onboarding platform, it's never been because of technology. It's always been because of people, and we haven't succeeded in bringing enough people with us on the journey. So yeah, thank you for your reflections on that. If we look ahead, we've described kind of where we are now, and all of you pretty much said the same thing, that this isn't really optional because of increasing regulatory expectations and a shortage of qualified compliance people, to say nothing to the cost of living and cost of employing people here. We've got to use technology to shoulder some of this burden. But if we look at the next 5 years, where as a panel do we see this potentially going? What other opportunities do you perceive for automating lower value operations within your business? Maybe, Pete, if I could start with you.
Yeah, I mean, so we've been implementing a digitization program for a while now, and we've been migrating our operational checklists into a system. The next phase is to broaden those out into more detailed workflows that dig into the underlying systems. So I think that kind of journey for a lot of businesses like ours is on the near horizon. We're all sort of different stages of that journey, and by doing that process, moving it into the digital world, the benefits are huge when it comes to the MI that you can get out of it, the controls that you can add, the resource allocation to make sure you're getting people doing the right jobs at the right time, and also the value that you can demonstrate to a client around your operations. So I think that space is where there's a lot of work to come.
Tamara, as somebody who has been towards the forefront of technological developments in Jersey in terms of your adoption and your business's adoption of new ways of doing things before many others were prepared to jump, are there areas that you see as ripe for the next disruptive change or the next area where we can save manual effort where it's not needed?
I'm really excited by AI and what it will be able to transform from onboarding services. I think the ability to collate vast amounts of open source information that we just don't get today, that it'll just blow our current screening systems out of the water, and what it will be able to do, summarize, collate, and bring back in an intelligent fashion for a human to review, the relevant pieces of it. What's really important in the digitization and the risk piece is straight-through processing for the low risk. And so regulators getting comfortable with the fact of, it's hitting kind of these low-risk pieces, and boom, it goes. So what are we spending our time on? We're spending our time on high risk. That's risk-based approach. I think it'll make regulators nervous, but that's an important place for us to be getting. So I'm excited by AI and being able to actually give us better risk data. Maybe even it goes to the dark web, it goes to other language sources, it goes to all kinds of things and can just bring it back to you in one place. The other thing, which will be controversial because a lot of people in our various IFCs are against registers, from a CDD standpoint, registers are amazing. I would love to get to a place where if, as we know, a lot of our jurisdictions at least are getting the corporate registers there, is that we can go in as service providers, get that as CDD, and we're done. So that will be deemed from a regulatory standpoint back in our home jurisdiction the equivalent of verified CDD because we've gotten it from a jurisdiction that, has decent registers that require it to be up to date and, has all of those controls in place. And so that would be a really easy way to, and the more registers we have against different types of legal entities and legal arrangements, the easier it would be to allow service providers to be able to, get that through third-party tools if you get licenses to those things. That would really change a client experience and financial services.
Do you see any jurisdiction that is close to that or even making significant steps towards it, the registers paradigm?
I think Jersey's doing something with Guernsey and Isle of Man, so that's a consultation piece, and that's sort of a small dip in there, of which, again, I hope goes successfully and that the jurisdictions are able to collaborate and don't get into politics about it, because I think that would be a very important first step. And if it's successful, I could see that expanding out to other groups. It also differentiates the IFCs that are really quality from the ones who really aren't. And that's where the bad money is migrating, because those controls aren't there and the gaps are still in place. So, the ones that are able to share the CDD, it's going to be a great experience, and again, differentiate the quality of IFCs.
Nadia, you have this privileged viewpoint of a view into lots of different organizations, both through your current role and previous roles that you've had. The most forward-looking of those businesses, what is it that they're thinking about from a tech standpoint to improve compliance performance or prevention of AML more generally?
I think it's joining things up. I think it's making sure that there is cohesion between the different systems that they have, because what can be really frustrating is that you have the best system that does this, or this, or this, but it's that one-stop shop. It's making sure that all of these things talk together so that you don't end up with the human frustrations in the middle. I think that's really important. I mean, in terms of Tamara's view about registers and building on from what was said earlier, one of the things that I think would be amazing if technology could do it would be for law enforcement to be able to say, this is a bad actor. Use API to go in, find out only if they have information on those bad actors and pull that back out, and then be able to block that bad actor from bringing money or having money in the jurisdiction. That's what I'd love to see in 5 years.
It's very interesting as a comment. The challenges of sharing data between law enforcement bodies and then from law enforcement bodies out to industry is something that we've looked at in the past as a business. And to come back to kind of people, I think people are the challenge more than the technology. That the tech is there. It's getting the buy-in to use it. I mean, to my mind, if you're sitting in the FIU, and we're going to have an address later from Jonathan Groom about his reflections of how his first period in post at the Jersey FIU has gone. But for me, if you're in the FIU and you receive a SAR about an individual, you should have a golden source access to all of the relevant data about that person that your jurisdiction holds, whether that sits within the Financial Services Commission or the corporate registry or within TCSPs or DNFPBs. You should be able to access all of it at your fingertips. And I think the fact that we can't do that is more a function of a lack of willingness than a lack of technology enabling it to happen. That being so, if we bring the focus back to our own organizations for a moment, I'm interested in reflections on practical examples of how RegTech has saved time, improved customer experience, reduced kind of manual, unproductive work for staff. Tamara, did you want to start on that one?
Yeah, it's not really a RegTech tool, and I saw it was on your roadmap to implement DocuSign into the onboarding tool, but we've, for more than a year, have been using DocuSign and have been able to configure it in such a way that we send it out to exactly do that, electronically get the certification, and that's saved a lot of time, and it can be any form of CDD. They put in the package and send it back in one DocuSign signature, whether or not they have a license to DocuSign themselves. And so that's been really, really helpful and amazing client experience, amazing in front of our business to show that, we were able to do that and have certainly been wanting it in onboarding tools. I think our onboarding tools a lot of time have focused on just the individuals. So the E ID and V has been very much about flashing passports and utility bills, and then not focusing all the other legal arrangements that, of course, we have to obtain CDD on. So they get a slick presentation in one way, and then they get old school certification in another. And that's not a great experience. So it's really about being able to allow all of that different type of CDD data to come in that slick channel, but save time. So we're getting there, but I'd say that's our small example for the moment.
So to just illustrate that a little further, is it the case that if somebody wants to provide a bundle of documents to you guys, they can digitally certify it through DocuSign?
Correct. And it could be any bundle of documents, because a lot of times, a lot of our business, I think, across the island is corporate and institutional. So you're dealing with a general counsel, or you're dealing with an intermediary, or somebody who has the package already, because these are professionals who are being onboarded all over the place. So they have all of this in place. So it just allows that particular certifier or person who's able to give that to you in that way in an easy manner currently.
Very interesting. It's long struck me that our obsession with wet ink certification is really a product of a long past age, not least because I'm entitled to certify stuff myself and as a barrister, and I didn't get a training module on how to do that at bar school. I don't have any special abilities in analysing passports or any other kind of document, and I would feel almost fraudulent in doing so, in that, obviously I'd do it for someone that I know, but if someone I didn't know were to ask me to, I could in theory offer that service, and I don't have any ability to meaningfully determine whether something's a real document or not. And equally, having seen in some service providers during my previous life as a regulatory investigator, some of the CDD that's held on file, the almost illegible stamps from certifiers in faraway places where you can't read much of what's on the stamp. You certainly can't contact the person to ask who they are and what their qualifications are, and you can't really see the passport because it's such a bad photocopy. You think, really, it must be time for a change. So on that note, Nadia, thinking about current or past roles, any reflections on how RegTech has measurably improved?
Absolutely. So when there are rule book changes, sometimes, or when there are FATF jurisdictional risk rating changes, trying to understand what your book of business looks like in terms of exposure to that particular jurisdiction is really tough, right? When you're trying to work through either, connections through paper files or disparately saved documents, etc. Being able to have all of that in one place and say, what are my connections to Cayman, BVI, whatever it might be, and actually understand, okay, these are the ones that we need to focus on, and being able to understand what those connections are, having that out of a system, massive saver of time. And I've seen both. I've seen it when it was very labor intensive and when it was tech based. So the latter obviously was better.
Pete, what about your thoughts on this area?
Well, maybe nothing quite as esteemed as my colleagues here, but I'm a simple Kiwi at heart. We found that the dynamic information request forms with the onboarding process save dramatic time. So part of the process that we struggled with was going out to clients, receiving information, getting it back, and going, oh right, I didn't realise you're into military hardware from North Korea. I've got some other forms that might be worth filling in, and it was that back and forth that was just burning up time. So whether we have the client fill those in directly, or sometimes we actually have staff fill those same forms in, so we internalise that external process, has saved measurable time for sure.
Very interesting. And I think we can all identify with the process of sending a load of emails to someone, after you realise that the relationship is more complicated than you thought it was. And not only is it a bad experience for the client, but also from a data security perspective, it's not great. We as a vendor supply some banks, large and small. And for those of you who don't work for banks, the InfoSec requirements that banks themselves are subject to, quite rightly, are off the scale. They're incredibly onerous, and there's a real emphasis laid on protecting data, both the integrity of it once it's been obtained and the mechanism of its obtaining. We get audited on site, we have to provide detailed insight into how our hosting works, all of this. And the knowledge that sometimes this is complemented by people just emailing people saying, can you send me documents, or can you send me a customer list, or whatever, can be quite difficult to compute. I think that we will see an increased focus on this area. Personally, I believe that in the next couple of years, as data security continues to go up the hierarchy of concerns in the balance with AML. And with that, we may see a greater emphasis on the mechanism for obtaining data and the security around that. Moving on to the next area that I wanted to ask you guys about, and this is in relation to something, Tamara, which you mentioned earlier, which was your excitement at the possibilities that AI offers. And I've been kind of around the block a few times, and I remember before blockchain was fashionable, whenever that became fashionable, before that, when you went to tech conferences, you'd see people saying, my solution's AI enabled, or machine learning is part of my tech. It was like 2013, 2014, when in most cases it wasn't. And now we're back because of large language models and ChatGPT and Copilot and all these exciting things that we've all read about and some of us will have used in our working lives. We're back in that area of excitement. Keen to understand if any of you have current plans to use AI within your business in a meaningful way, and if you do, or even if you don't, whether you've thought about how you could balance the tremendous opportunity that AI offers with the need for human oversight. So to give an example, I'm a lawyer by training, and one of the early areas where people got really excited about AI was in terms of revolutionizing the research process if somebody comes to a lawyer with a problem that they need to solve. And traditionally, the way this has been done is that a partner or senior lawyer might know the answer from their own experience, and if they don't, they get a junior lawyer to go off and trawl through Westlaw or one of the other databases of precedents and cases to try and find out what the relevant case is to this particular knotty problem could be. There's a lot of excitement around large language model AI, of the ChatGPT type, when it emerged, with the thought that it could do all of that for you. And it could, within 30 seconds, produce something that might take an associate a week of effort to bring back. The problem is that some of these models have a tendency to hallucinate, which can be a bit of a problem when it comes to things like legal advice. They can make up sources and rationales for opinions that they're giving, and we don't always know when they're doing it, such that there is a whole area of endeavor now which is applying one AI model to analyzing the output of another one to try and work out when this hallucination is occurring. So from a legal services perspective, that has put a bit of a dampener on whether we could rely on this stuff. But there is still, I think, even in that environment, a potential for it to be useful and assistive in research terms for an initial cut. I'm keen to understand from you guys whether you see it being something that you could realistically use within the next couple of years in your business. And if so, what sort of applications you might have in mind and how the oversight process might work. Maybe Nadia, if we start with you.
Yeah, I think key to this is having a policy around the types of AI you're going to use and the parameters around which the firm is prepared to use them. I've got one particular client who's looking at an AI solution at the moment to be able to create a set of policies and procedures for a multi-jurisdictional business. And that's sort of trying to bring together things up at a group level, which means that actually they can be rolled out more locally. So it's definitely something that's in the space. There are providers out there that are more targeted towards that regulatory environmental space. So actually you're not just getting the whole of the net. But you absolutely have to have a level of oversight and sense checking that goes on from a human perspective. I think the opportunity that that brings is that, you know, if everybody's doing the same thing, then that you can put to one side, hopefully, you know, the sort of nuts and bolts, and allow for innovation then to happen, because you've got the basics covered, meeting the regulatory requirements, and it's that innovative piece that actually I think is really the opportunity for human intervention within that process.
Because if you were going to your regulator as that service provider and saying, here's our policy suite, and by the way, AI wrote it for us, you would want to have a pretty good rationale as to how you checked it and assured it. And
absolutely. As an,
in advance.
As a compliance officer or MLCO, you would be wanting to make sure that actually what was in that policy framework matched the regulatory framework in that jurisdiction. So you still have to have a level of oversight, but what you can do is get to those changes or understand how on a multi-jurisdictional basis where the changes and differences might be on a much quicker basis.
Pete, in your business, which I know prides itself on being tech-enabled and forward-thinking, do you perceive any immediate applications for AI, or perhaps some slightly further down the tracks that could materialize as the technology matures?
Yeah, I'd just make a point around the oversight first. And we touched on earlier around digitizing processes. And it's when you get to that phase of your development, you're able to automate the controls around it. And once you can do that, then you can reduce some of the oversight. Absolutely don't want to get rid of it. And I don't think that'll ever be the case. But you can, with those digital controls in place, the technical controls in place, you can place more reliance on that data being in good shape as it moves downstream from the collection point. And sorry, what was the other question? AI.
So within your business, how you see it being used, and perhaps just as a couple of thoughts here, things that we've seen, in addition to what Tamara mentioned earlier, which was a screening use case of assembling data from lots of sources into a single intelligible profile, which I think is a very good example, and probably one of the earliest to be commercialized uses of AI in a compliance use case. Two of the things that we've seen, which I think do make sense if they can be used and regulated well, I'm interested in your thoughts on them, are first off, using AI to read and make sense of large volumes of hard copy scanned data. And this is something that a few vendors have looked at. We're engaged at the moment in a pilot with Accenture in which we're helping a particular bank to analyze reams of hard copy material that otherwise somebody would have to read through from start to finish in relation to their correspondent banking relationships. And they've got 700 or 800 relationships, and each relationship has tens of thousands of pages of very, very boring legal documents that need to be analyzed. And Accenture, through their tech practice, have developed a model that's been trained to recognize and analyze some of these documents and to pull out data fields, essentially, from them. So you might be able to reduce a 100-page PDF down to 30 data points that you want to have in your onboarding flow for your bank. And to me, that's really exciting, albeit what the trials have showed is that although the AI can do it, the output is not 100% reliable.
I think that's the key, isn't it? You lawyers are very cunning, and it doesn't take too many little words in a contract for it to head south. So I think that the focus of that kind of process, in my view, would be around the quality control and how you're going to build confidence to place reliance on those results. And there's that little factor in there that's going to be difficult to hone in on, I guess.
The other area which from my own professional life I've seen crying out for AI, and I know that some vendors now claim to do it, but I haven't independently seen the product of their work, is in relation to transaction monitoring, particularly in a bank context. Yeah. Stephen and I, back in the day, worked on a number of investigations of banks where the TM software was pretty dumb. It couldn't understand nuance. It generated far too many false positive alerts for stuff that wasn't. bad activity and missed some stuff that glaringly was. And this is going back a few years, so I'm sure if any of you work for banks, you probably enhanced things since then, but certainly back then there were very rigid thresholds for different customer types that produced perverse outcomes. And it seems to me that that is an area, particularly as it's entirely quantitative, where it should be possible to say to a model, we know these things about the customer, this is what their income is, this is what kind of account it is they hold, these are the sorts of things they've bought historically. Does what they're doing now seem to fit that pattern or not? That would seem a good use case to me if we can make it work.
I wonder if I can suggest another one, which is, a lot of the time we have, especially we talked about earlier on about verification of source of funds and source of wealth, and actually using AI to trawl the net to pull together that high-profile individual's history and actually being able to cross-reference all of those different things to be able to build that profile would actually be quite compelling. It's so much more difficult to do it as a human, given the volume of information, but you could potentially be using technology to do that sort of thing as well.
I think that's a really good suggestion. And at the Law Society AML event, there were a number of vendors exhibiting that were mainly focused on source of funds analysis. And there were none that were yet trying to do that bit, although I think that's a really good next step. But there were several that were using open banking, being something that's possible to do quite well in the UK, although not in many other centres, to make it easy for people to provide bank statement copies and annotate them and say, look, this is where the funds are coming from this transaction. But I agree that, I think those of us who follow the news will have seen that Google and other search providers are scrambling as to how they commercialize AI more visibly in their search. And it's an interesting balance for them because it costs a lot of money to run an AI search. It's not cheap. There's a lot of resource involved. But some of the suggestions as to how this might work have been along the lines that you mentioned, so that rather than getting a list of search results, you get more of a profile or a document explaining everything the model has learnt about your search target. Tamara, you mentioned this in relation to an earlier question, but any additional thoughts from you around AI, how we can use it and how we can manage our reliance upon it?
Yeah, I'm a little more positive about AI, actually. I think not using ChatGPT, but if you have a closed AI system that is trained on what it is you want it to do. So certainly on our regulatory horizon scanning, for instance, you can train it on, there aren't that many sources in Jersey if you think about our small jurisdictions. Where do you need to go? The various agencies and, government legal websites and the Data Protection Office to figure out how can you do regulatory scanning, and then ask it those regulatory questions, excuse me, when you're trying to do some research on this jurisdiction versus Guernsey versus, and so if you have it trained on these various jurisdictions, excuse me, that you need, I think it's quite successful, even the things that are out there now. Cyan has that bot that they released early. I've tried it out. It's pretty good, actually, and it's just reading the AML handbook, basically, for you, but it is setting out all the pieces, that you need to know, and and other law firms in the UK have various things as well that are coming out. So I do think I'm quite more positive about getting good results. Contract reviews, we're using that already. Drafting minutes, and for corporate minutes out of meetings and using it for our own internal meetings, we're using that already as well with really, really good success.
Yeah.
So it'll definitely become more reliable, and then it's a way of ensuring that you've proved internally that it meets the integrity test, and then you have to obviously show your regulators as well.
One of my colleagues who's with us today has a utility which you can use to listen to a Teams meeting or phone call with the permission of the person on the other end, of course, and it will then produce a note of the call. So in addition to what Teams already does, which is a transcript, this is actually a note with kind of headings, what was discussed, what the action points were. It's great. It's really, really good. So guys, it's been really, really interesting hearing your thoughts. Thank you for sharing them with us. I've certainly learnt quite a bit in terms of where industry is looking, where the next developments might be. We've got time for just one or two questions from the floor, if anybody has one for our panel. I think we're all good. All right, well, could I, yes, one question from there, and then we'll close.
Sorry, a bit quickly, just curious whether you think AI can be used as kind of like an internal tool, so you can actually turn it on your own company to see when you can identify deficiencies, maybe in things like CDD.
So for the live stream, that was, could AI be used in an internal capacity, sort of turning the lens on your own business to try and identify deficiencies rather than an external scanning the horizon? Brief thoughts from anyone who'd like to jump in on that.
Definitely you can create, and I know there are firms that have created AI tools that are trained on their own policies and procedures and all their forms and checklists. So it doesn't matter where they're stored because nobody can find anybody's policies and systems if you're a larger organization. So you just ask it a natural language question and it'll come up with everything that you need to know, whatever team that might be from. But certainly I think you could have it analyze the data a little bit on the, like the transaction monitoring piece. So it could go look for maybe anomalies in the data that you have, which you could see that being part of KYC remediation.
Pete, any thoughts on that?
Not really. No, I think that was an excellent answer for Tamara. I mean, it would be, I don't know where the question's coming from, but it would be great to imagine a world where we can have our compliance monitoring program all baked into a nice little agent that runs over our databases and gives you some nice pie graphs. I mean, that's conceptually where we'll get to. I'm not sure we're quite there yet with the integration between AI tools and underlying systems. So AI tools at the moment are very good at consuming documentation, reviewing that, and pushing out a draft result from it. They're not quite there as far as digging into underlying business systems and collating that data, in my experience.
Nadia, final thought from you.
And I suppose the other thought is there are often quirks or differences or exceptions that might be thrown up by this sort of thing that could cause your business to be tied in knots. So there will be some work to be done to sort of try and get around those and to actually allow the system to understand those so that it's not throwing up negative results when it doesn't need to.
Brilliant. I'd like to say a big thank you to our panel. I hope it's been illuminating. I've certainly learned quite a bit, so thank you guys.